the disintegration of the Ndwandwe kingdom had a politically highly significant aftermath. It allowed Shaka to establish unchallenged domination of the former Ndwandwe territories north of the Black Mfolozi. It encouraged opposition to Shaka to emerge more strongly, if still secretly, in the ranks of the Zulu royal house, a movement which culminated in his assassination at the hands of his brothers in September 1828. It opened the way for the re-establishment of the Dlamini kingdom as a major power north of the Pongola and of the Maroteng or Pedi kingdom in the Middle Olifants region, and for the emergence of the Ndebele kingdom on the northern Highveld. In retrospect, it can be seen as an event that was crucial in shaping the politics of East and Southern Africa in the 19th century. This is John Wright's summation of the consequences of the dissolution of the Ndwandwe kingdom. Obviously, its significance for us is in allowing the budding Ngwane or Dlamini state to emerge. As we will in time see, without Shaga's defeat of Zwide, it is almost certain that the Ngwane state would not have emerged. Zwide was resolved to destroy the Dlamini royal house. It was only circumstances that later intervened to safeguard that budding state. It is for this reason, and his role as a model of Nguni state formation, both as an ideological and organizational model, that I wish to discuss Zwide's career. He is, after all, alongside Dingiswayo and Shaka, part of that great triumvirate that both precede and shadow Ngwane's state formation. Unfortunately, Ndwandwe history is shrouded in no small amount of darkness. John Wright eloquently explains the problem of Ndwandwe history. The breakup of the Ndwandwe kingdom, the Sikunyana kaNdwandwe, after its defeat by the Zulu under Shaka kaSenzangakhona in 1826, destroyed its ruling elite and ruptured the processes in which memories of the kingdom's past were being transmitted orally by intellectuals linked to that elite. To be sure, groups of the Ndwandwe lived on in the polities which consolidated in the 1820s and the 1830s as the Zulu, Swazi, and Ndebele kingdoms, but under conditions in which public narration of their histories, like those of other subordinate groups, tended to be suppressed in favor of the telling of the histories of the respective ruling groups. As Soqwacha kaPapu, one of James Stewart's informants, puts it, in the Zulu kingdom, people did not discuss matters of former times to avoid being put to death. For a person who spoke about these things would be killed. It would be said, "Where did you get this from? You will spoil the land with this talking." In the one kingdom, the Gaza kingdom of Soshangane in modern Mozambique, where accounts of the Ndwandwe were not suppressed, the deliberate policy of the Portuguese post their 1895 victory to break up the ruling elites fragmented any memory of the Ndwandwe and Zwide. So our understanding of Zwide and the Ndwandwe narrative is necessarily fragmented and subject to a great deal of speculation. The historians that have done so much to advance our understanding, men like David Hedges, Philip Bonner, and John Wright, have drawn from the oral tradition, the Portuguese sources, and the James Stewart collection to draw out a picture of the Ndwandwe story that is nuanced. Their account is not altogether revisionist, but it does call into question some of the received wisdom in the field, and therefore promotes a critical reading in the interested reader. Anyway, just as the Dlamini story originates in and around Delagoa Bay, so too does the Ndwandwe story originates. In the first half of the 18th century, the Ndwandwe occupied the area just south of the bay. This is the period that saw the expansion of the Tembe under Mangobe, and then in the 1750, the expansion of Maputo, Mangobe's grandson, into the area that would have earlier on been occupied by the Ndwandwe. We have no account of this, but the groups must have clashed. And we can really surmise this from how fast and how far the Ndwandwe migrated, at least far for that period. They went south crossed the Pongola, and finally found refuge in the Maputo hills. They obviously found the expansion of the Tembe and the Maputo uncomfortable. We can also tell, or rather it is likely, many of the historians, in particular Philip Bonner and John Wright, indicate this, that the process of migration, coupled with the experience of seeing the Tembe and the Maputo, likely led to a greater centralization and militarization of Ndwandwe society. These pressures likely would have been driven by the predatory nature of states around you as you migrated. It forced the small chieftaincy or clan to husband resources and have its young men forever on guard. In fact, one of the historical clues we use to understand this process is looking at the slow disappearance of the circumcision rite. Circumcision needs the seclusion of your men for a number of weeks. And in a group like the Ndwandwe who are migrating and therefore subject to many chieftaincies and clans attacking them, this would have been highly dangerous. And so the solution, likely, instead of allowing the circumcision rites as a way of bonding and as the threshold into manhood, would have been to transform those circumcision rites into military cohorts and allow the young men to bond in that way. And thus we have the tantalizing possibility of institutional innovation as a result of migration. Anyway, this question of the origins of the regiments is, for me, one of the most interesting historical puzzles. And at some point, I hope to have a historian on here and ask questions and see where the weight of evidence points. At any rate, when the Ndwandwe felt they'd likely put enough distance between themselves and the Tembe, they found they occupied good cattle country with access to spring and summer grazing quarters and high-lying ridges to the west, and with access to winter grazing quarters in the low-lying savanna to the east. In achieving this, they likely displaced a weaker group that has been lost to history. Nevertheless, their gains could not be taken for granted because they occupied a dynamic and dangerous region with strong competitive dynamics. To the northeast, Maputo continued to expand southeastwards across the Maputo Pongola River, fueled by the wealth he was amassing from the ivory trade with the British. He continued to displace or subsume clans abutting his expanding kingdom. To the north were the Dlamini clan, a chiefdom the Ndwandwe had intermarried with for many generations, but like them were displaced by the Tembe Maputo expansion. Initially occupying the area east of the Lubombo Mountains in the basins of the Usutfu Ngwavuma rivers, they crossed the Pongola into the Maputo area, and on finding the Ndwandwe less than amused, moved north into the Shiselweni region in modern southern Swaziland. Although a tributary chieftaincy to the Ndwandwe, they were already showing that peculiar insolent attitude towards the Ndwandwe that would explode under Zwide. To the southeast lay the Ndwandwe's greatest threat, the Nyambose chiefdom that would come to become the Mtetwa kingdom of Dingiswayo. Under Chief Kai and then his son Jobe, the Nyambose expanded in the region south of the lower White Mfolozi River. This was good elephant country and would prove lucrative as the ivory trade in Delagoa picked up. Under Dingiswayo, the Maputo and the Mtetwa established a robust trade alliance. Unfortunately, their trade route ran through the Ndwandwe's eastern vassals. In this area, at the southern end of the Lubombo range, lived an offshoot of the Ndwandwe, which in the late 18th century seems to have been under the rule of Zigote. To the south of it, extending as far as the Mfolozi, were the Msane, the Jele or the Nwangeni, and the Nzimela, all of whom were related to the Ndwandwe. Zwide, being the head of the main line that bound all of these clans together, claimed suzerainty over all of these groups. But as a matter of practicality, their location on the main trade route between the Maputo and the Mtetwa chiefdoms gave them a certain strategic advantage, which they used to play off the Ndwandwe and the Mtetwa ruling house off against each other. This was the situation that prevailed at the time Zwide led the Ndwandwe, and this forms the backdrop of his career.